Hey guys, Sketchy here, and for this episode I was thinking I'm going to talk about something basically for people who are starting out, but not necessarily starting out D&D specifically, um, more for people who are going to be DMing for the first time. And this is something that some of my players probably should have seen beforehand. I probably should have talked to them a little more about this. Because to give a little basis on that, me and my players took some time and we did some downtime, and I let them DM a couple sessions of their own little thing, and I just played, and just so that I could take a break and they could get a feel for it, which is something that you should probably do with your group at least once or twice. Just take a break from the main campaign. If you guys are just constantly going and going and going, and unless it's really, really good, and the DM just absolutely loves everything that's going on, someone's going to get burnt out, and you just want to take a break. Say, okay, we're going to put that off to the shelf for a moment, and I want to do something different. So it's the situation usually arises where people are sitting around for one reason or another, and they decide to play. Okay, let's start playing D&D. Just like my group before. My first group, where we were sitting around our houses just doing nothing. But now who to run the game? That's always the big question. Obviously, you want the person with the most experience if you have that situation. If you have a situation where you do have someone who has experience, let them run the game if they want to. But say you're in a situation like my friends, where no one knows what they're doing. Well, there's a few things that I can advise. This is from my effectively 3 years now of jamming, and that's kind of going to go into my first point. Get help, not mental health or anything like that. Get help from various places. Go look up YouTube videos. There's plenty of people out there talking about this kind of thing in one way, shape, or form. My point of view is going to be someone who is basically his entire experience, or not his entire experience, but 99% of my experience playing games has been running them. So I've pulled my knowledge from multiple different places as well. So that's the first thing. Get some advice, because you are not going to know everything. Even if you grab the books and you pour through the DMG and you know the player's handbook, there's things that you just won't get. And even your first game, it might be a train wreck. There's nothing wrong with that. It's all learning. It's all growing and getting better. And that's something you need to, first off, you need to understand things aren't going to go exactly how you plan. And that's one of the next points. Don't set a hard plan. I know that sounds almost counterintuitive, because if you set a hard plan of the players are going to do this, and then they're going to do this, and then they're going to do that, and da 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 da. It's referred to usually as railroading, where the DM wants the players to do every last thing exactly as he plans it. And if you do that, then the players are not going to do it. First and foremost, they will not do what you want them to. Second off, they'll get rebellious. They won't find it as fun if X, Y, and Z have to be met. To kind of compare it to computer games, Square Enix does this a lot. I can guarantee other companies do this, where you have to go talk to this one guy who's out in the middle of fucking nowhere, or you have to talk to every single person in the town to get the one tiny bit of information that will trigger the chain of will trigger the next event. And sometimes that's annoying as all hell, and that's why they even make strategy guides for games like that. So don't expect your players to do what you want them to. I'm going to use some from all, all from me and from them. My first game, as I mentioned earlier, I had expected my players to kind of think, okay, well, he got that thing, and I'm going to give him this thing, and I'm going to give him that thing, and they're all going to be happy with the way things are. I'm referring to my experience with Excalibur, where my DMPC was supposed to get the weapon, and everyone else was going to get something comparable. Um, None of them went for it. Well, they went for it after I kind of said, this is what's going to happen. If you guys want me to change it, I will. And they just said, no, it's fine, whatever. But so, how am I saying? So it didn't work exactly the way I wanted it to, and it just kind of fell into they were accepting of it. Another example would be when one of my players, Paco, he ran his campaign, and it was fairly well set up. It wasn't if you go beyond this point without doing this thing, it's not going to happen. No, he let us go, but we just eventually got to a point where you can't win, and bad things are going to happen to you. Like we were supposed to meet this group of knights in the town. Basically, the story was something was stolen from a woman, I think it was, and we decided to chase after them. And this turned into, we are going into a dungeon, and somewhere in the dungeon there is this area of total blackness. And after that, there is a Lovecraftian horror sort of boss at the end. And he effectively explains to us, because I think it was getting to the end of the night, I play with a bunch of people. I'm West Coast, and most of my players are East Coast, and one person is 2 hours ahead of East Coast. And so our time frames are really messed up. And so I think the night was just winding down, and he's like, there's no way you can even beat this thing. The way I planned it out was you're supposed to get these knights, and they were going to guide you through the darkness, and then they were going to help you fight this boss. But because you didn't do any of that, there's nothing you can do. And I guess you can do that if your players are okay with that kind of thing. That's fine. Another example would be when Vea ran the campaign. And this is sort of another point of know your players. And you're not going to know your players 100%. There's going to be things and quirks, and they're not going to always, as I said, they're not going to always do what you expect them to do. So, as a player, I am a very headstrong, for lack of a better term. I'm always trying to do something. I'm always trying to make the story progress one way or another. And I'm also very combat focused. There's sort of a joke going around whenever I play, because in both the times that I have been the player, my character has had a bad time, just in general. But there's a joke going on where I'm just constantly trying to do something where bad things will constantly happen to me. I'm also very combat focused, so I was playing a sorcerer. I think we were going only to level 5. And level 5 sorcerers in Pathfinder, I don't think get a lot of they don't get a lot of spells. So what a good way to build them would be is to give them support kind of things, crowd control, buffs, nerfs, put people to sleep, and so they kind of expected, okay, because that's the kind of player she is. She is a very stat whorish kind of, and I don't mean that by any offense, sort of a min-maxing kind of player. And so they will take the meta, most effective tool available option, which comes up to a side tangent in my brain, where meta has too many fucking meanings. but they will. So she'll do the meta thing, and I won't. I'll just do what kind of seems interesting to me. So we go into this dungeon, and I can't remember any of this setup. It was a good concept. I remember that much, but I don't remember much else. And I think it was sort of a game based off of a actual game, which is a good thing to use. Use references all the time, and I'll get to that in a second. But basically, there were a group of where there were multiple enemies, and they were all sort of this completely min-maxed bosses that could almost one-shot most of our characters, if I remember correctly. And that sort of goes into just don't expect them to do what you just don't expect them to do anything. Plain and simple. Don't expect your players to act this way. Don't expect your players to build this way. Just know how they are and kind of give a general idea of how they are. Like something I've had to do recently. I know that my players are going to absolutely decimate most of my enemies. Most of the things I throw at them are no match for them, in all honesty. So a good way to take care of that is to do other things. Either just throw a massive amount because you know they can drop a massive amount, and so that there's more attacks going against your players so that something might happen. Magic is the biggest thing I've implemented. I'm not a very spellcasting kind of person. My players or my characters, and that's kind of carried over into my DMing. But recently, I picked up a book, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment, and I started pulling spellcasters from it. And spellcasters are a great thing to do, simply for the fact that they deal massive amounts of damage in a large area, and they're fairly easy to protect, in all honesty. Lightning Bolt has been my best friend as a DM, just to put some fear into my players. Because Lightning Bolt is outside of the range of every single one of their spells, and does a decent amount of damage. I think right now they are up to maybe 100 feet, and Lightning Bolt is 120-ish, because they're a group and they're usually easily to put in. They're easy to get into a line, so bam. And they might hear that and try and stop me. So as I was mentioning, another thing to do is resources. So when you're gonna run a game, you're probably gonna get the player's handbook, and you're probably gonna know generally how that works. Then you're gonna get the DMG, and you're gonna have some other things. Pick up something like this, monster manual of any kind, is great. What I'm referencing right now is mainly pertaining to D&D, but it works for all sorts of games. Honestly, get more books. It helps you, it helps the publisher, because then they're going to make more. If you find a game you like, support that publisher. That's a good thing to do in general. Next is these two books. These are for Pathfinder. They will work for 3.5. These are, if you can get those out there, the Monster Codex and the NPC Codex. For someone like me, these are godsends. Basically, what they do is they give lists of different types of for the Monster Codex. It gives different types of humanoid monsters. So, for instance, there's the Orc section, and the Orc section will have all of these. It'll have, I think, like 10-ish entries of different types of orcs you can throw, and they scale from the base level CR 1/3 or something like that, and they'll go up to, I think there's like a CR 8 variant where you throw this single thing against a group of level 6 to 7 characters, and they're gonna have a hard time with just this one orc. and it gives spell loadouts, items, loot, all that kind of stuff. NPC Codex does a similar thing where it gives NPC. It basically gives you this pre-built NPC. So it's got level, all the stats required for it, and it also includes encounters, sort of. Sorry about that. So say you want to have a group of thieves fighting your group. Well, go in there and it'll give you this list of 3 or 4 enemies, or it's just a group of enemies, and it'll meet this the CR rating, the challenge rating, so that you can actually get a really good fight. And it kind of helps with loot too, because when you defeat this enemy, it has a list of all their stuff, and you can just take it off of them. I would suggest paring that down a little bit, because now my group has like 5 sets of Masterwork full plate, which isn't that much, but at their current level, but still, all the magic stuff they have along with it is a lot. But it can be for anything. Like, it has all sorts of characters, roles, literally NPCs. Any sort of NPC you possibly need, it's in this book, and it's saved my ass a lot. I was gonna go somewhere on that. God, I hate when I do this. I had a point, and I lost it. Oh, that's gonna bother me. Oh, what was it? Okay, I'll just go on to my next thing. I completely forgot the point I was going to make. I'm just gonna generally be adaptive. Oh, I remember. Take inspiration from other things, because there's a reason works of fiction are popular. Is because no one's actually done their own thing. This character is really popular, and there are 8 million branches off of that character. There's nothing wrong with taking inspiration from other things. Take this character that you really like, morph them a little bit to fit into your world better, and then play them out. Just don't go too specific into it. And if you're going to make a reference to a character, I'd suggest trying to do it with someone your players might not know. For instance, I was watching a video. I think it was called The Critical Miss, which was a kind of a funny series. Go watch them; they're on YouTube. But yeah, go watch them. They're kind of funny. But what they did towards the end of what I was watching is they took characters directly from League of Legends, and there's nothing really wrong with that, because I've kind of done that a little bit in my current game. But the thing is, they all played the game, and they took the character exactly as is, plopped him in there, and everyone just kind of knew how to deal with him. Which you can kind of do in the book with traditional monsters. But if you're doing your job correctly, they shouldn't be able to. What do I mean by this? Don't tell your characters the name straight off the bat. If they do a knowledge nature roll or something along those lines, then you can kind of give them more information. But I wouldn't just flat out say, okay, you guys go into this dungeon, and this is something I did originally. You go into this dungeon, and there is an ank egg there. So now that you've told them it's an ank egg, they can just they can just pop open the book and say, what's an ank egg? Oh, it's this. It's got this many. It's got this much stats. It's got this much health. It's got X, Y, and Z, and this is how I beat it. Because and they shouldn't do this and some of them won't. And I've actually had to specifically tell my players, do not look up the stats for this thing. Please just don't do it. And this is because since we play online, we play over great distances. We're all in front of our computer, and if any of us don't have multiple tabs open at the same time while we're playing the game, I'd be surprised. If you aren't, thank you guys for not doing that. Otherwise, stop looking up the fucking stats, Vea. No, sorry about that. But other than that, be adaptive. That's honestly the best tool a DM can have. You got to think on your feet. You got to have backup plans. That's something that's good to have. If you can't think on your feet, just have a backup plan. Say if they don't go this way, or they don't do what you want them to do, either just roll with it, or give something to kind of get them in the right direction. Something I like to do is I will put NPCs along. Right now I have the Spectre group, and they're kind of like, they'll just pop up every now and then and say, hey, you should probably go over there and do that thing. I heard someone really bad, or I heard Vex was over there doing something wrong. And that usually is enough for them, because they kind of get that I don't have anything planned for them in this area, so go back to the main story. And that's something bad on my part. But I'll also kind of just roll with what they have. They wanted to, for instance, in our last session, there was a group of rats. And they wanted to go and stop the rats from attacking the monastery again, because that's what happened. A group of rat men attacked the monastery, and they wanted them to stop. So they went down there. I expected this big fight. I set up 15 enemies or something along those lines. I was just like, okay, they're going to come in, they're going to fight, and they just sat down and talked with the guy. And I'm just like, huh. And because they have a paladin who has diplomacy out the ass, they were able to just talk their way out of the fight. And it's not what I had intended, but it works. And it's more realistic, honestly. And that's something that a lot of games do miss, is a little bit of realism. Because enemies aren't just going to fight till they're dead. But at the same time, you're not going to be able to walk in, say the paladin, or say whoever. Say you walk up to the king and say, you walk up to the king and say, I saw your son murdered, and it was by this guy, and you have this amazing bluff skill. But the king knows that his son is, like, down the hall right now. He saw him 5 minutes ago. You aren't going to be able to bluff him. So that's something that should happen. People, in general, are stubborn. So try and keep those realisms in there. I'm going all over the place, aren't I? I guess I should wrap this up. In general, be adaptive. Use outside resources to your benefit, but don't lean on them. And kind of get to know your players. And in general, unless someone is being blatantly offensive, actively going out of their way to screw up your game, roll with it. That'll make it more fun for everyone, I think. Because the players don't want to have the DM, who is sort of the referee, dictating their actions. But at the same time, you are in charge of your game, so make sure you are in charge. I think that's all. So, until next time, guys, game on.